After my husband passed, I hid from my daughter that he left me 22 rental homes, a shopping plaza, and as the door clicked shut, a phrase echoed, "No remaining distributions." Then I noticed the signatures, two names I'd never heard before in 40 years of marriage. Has something like this happened in your family? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. If you've ever wondered how far someone would go to steal your life while you're grieving, this story will shake you to your core. Have you ever felt completely powerless while someone close to you performed kindness in public but destroyed you in private? Has something like this happened in your family? Do you know someone who trusted the wrong person with everything they owned? What I'm about to share isn't just about money or property. It's about the moment you realize the person you raised would rather see you homeless than share what your husband built for you both. This is about a war fought with paperwork, won with patience, and settled in a courtroom where the truth came out one document at a time. Follow along as we uncover how a grieving widow discovered her own daughter was systematically erasing her from her own life, and how she fought back without saying a word. The room went still after the line, "No remaining distributions assigned to Margaret Thompson." Then someone laughed. Not a cruel laugh, a knowing one. I didn't stand. I didn't speak. I counted the clicks of pens and the distance to the door. 22 feet. Past the clerk's desk where Linda sat with her leather folder, past the attorney who wouldn't meet my eyes, past the court reporter whose fingers never stopped moving. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's coffee had gone cold. The judge's gavel rested beside a stack of papers that apparently proved I didn't exist. "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said, and I almost looked around to see who else she meant. "Do you understand the preliminary findings?" I understood that my daughter had just convinced a room full of strangers that I was unfit to manage the 22 rental homes my husband and I had spent 40 years building together. I understood that according to these papers, I couldn't handle the shopping plaza that still sent me birthday cards from the tenants. I understood that the woman who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms now believed I was too fragile to sign my own checks. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. Linda turned in her chair. She wore the navy suit I'd bought her for her first job interview. Her lawyer whispered something that made her smile. A small smile. Practiced. The clerk shuffled papers. Each page sounded like a door closing. "Temporary oversight will be established pending full psychiatric evaluation," the judge continued. "Mrs. Thompson, you'll be contacted regarding assessment scheduling." I nodded. Linda's pen clicked twice, a habit from childhood when she was pleased with herself. The eucalyptus hand sanitizer smell mixed with printer ink and old wood polish. I focused on breathing through my nose. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Robert taught me during labor 34 years ago. "Any questions, Mrs. Thompson?" I had questions. Like why the witness signatures belonged to people I'd never met in 4 decades of marriage. Like how documents got filed while Robert was in surgery and I was holding his hand. Like when my daughter had time to meet with attorneys while I was planning his funeral. "No questions, Your Honor." The gavel came down soft. Final. Linda gathered her papers with the efficiency of someone who'd been practicing this moment. Her heels clicked across the tile. Confident, measured. She didn't look back. If someone tried to edit you out of your own life, would you fight back now or gather proof first? Subscribe, this gets deeper. I stayed seated until the courtroom emptied. The bailiff swept crumbs from someone's breakfast pastry off the defense table. Normal Tuesday morning cleanup in a room where I'd just been legally declared incompetent to manage my own life. As the door clicked shut, a phrase echoed, "No remaining distributions." Then I noticed the signatures, two names I'd never heard before in 40 years of marriage. I pulled out my phone and typed both names into my notes app. Patricia Wells. Michael Hendricks. Complete strangers who apparently knew my mental state better than I did. The parking lot was half empty. Linda's car was gone. I sat in my Honda for 10 minutes, engine off, watching people walk to their normal Tuesday appointments. A woman pushed a stroller. A man carried coffee and a briefcase. Regular people handling regular problems. I wasn't regular anymore. According to the state of Ohio, I was a problem that needed managing. But as I started the engine, something Robert used to say came back. Margaret, the quietest people take the best notes. I drove home to start taking notes. Comment: silence is not equal to surrender. If you'd have stayed seated but started planning. The rental checks had stopped coming to our mailbox. I found out why when I called the pharmacy tenant myself. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," said Janet from West Side Pharmacy. "Your daughter explained everything. We've been sending payments to the new address for 3 weeks now." The new address was a P.O. box I'd never opened. I hung up and called the grocery store tenant. Same story. Then the family that rented the duplex on Broad Street. All redirected. All handled by Linda while I was going through a difficult time. The house felt different when I got off that last phone call. Bigger. Quieter. The kitchen table where Robert and I used to sort rent checks every month looked too clean. No neat stacks of envelopes. No calculator. No deposit slips with our shared handwriting. I made tea and let it go cold while I stared at the empty space. The answering machine blinked red. 3 messages. Message 1, Mom, just wanted you to know I've been taking care of the rental situation. Don't worry about anything. Message 2, Mrs. Thompson, this is Bradley from Estate Administration Services. We'll be in touch regarding property transition protocols. Message 3, a hang-up. Estate Administration Services. I'd never heard of them. Robert's lawyer was Hendricks and Associates downtown. Had been for 15 years. One signature can cost you everything. Subscribe before you miss the warning signs. I walked through rooms that used to feel like ours. Robert's coffee mug still sat in the sink. I hadn't washed it because it still smelled like him. Dark roast and the mint gum he chewed after breakfast. His reading glasses were folded on the side table next to a book about the Civil War he'd never finish. But other things were missing. The manila folder where we kept rental agreements. The address book with tenant phone numbers. The spare keys to all 22 properties that used to hang on hooks by the back door. I opened the drawer where Robert kept his personal papers. Empty except for old warranty cards and a grocery store coupon for pasta sauce. Everything important had been cleared out. By someone with a key. The email notification chimed on Robert's laptop. I'd never checked his email before, but the password was our anniversary date. He wasn't secretive. Just organized. Subject line, tenant compliance update. No greeting. No signature. Just an address I'd never authorized and a list of administrative changes that transferred all rental communications to Linda's business address. The timestamp showed the email was sent while I was at Robert's bedside, holding his hand through his final night. I printed the email. Then I made a fresh cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table where we used to count our blessings along with our rental income. Some people grieve loudly. I grieve by getting organized. I started a new folder. The first document inside was that email with the impossible timestamp. The second document would come from the drawer that squeaked whenever someone honest was looking for the truth. Ever notice how the important stuff hides in the places you clean around but never clean out? I didn't mean to find Robert's private drawer. It stuck, the way it always did when something important was waiting. The desk in our bedroom had been Robert's territory. Bills, tax papers, warranty information, all organized in a way that made sense to him but looked like chaos to everyone else. I'd been putting off cleaning it out because touching his things felt like admitting he wasn't coming back. But when Linda called asking about Dad's business files, I knew I needed to look. The bottom drawer required 2 hands to open. Behind hanging folders labeled insurance and utilities, my fingers found a manila envelope taped to the back panel. Inside, 3 things that changed everything. First, a handwritten note in Robert's careful script. Linda called again about the plaza. 3rd time this month. Says we should liquidate while the market's good. Told her no. She got quiet. The wrong kind of quiet. The date was 6 months before Robert died. Second, a draft of our will, but not the final version. This one had my name crossed out in red ink. In the margin, someone had written, "Discuss with attorney privately." The handwriting wasn't Robert's. Third, a calendar page from Robert's appointment book. 3 meetings with our lawyer in the month before Robert's heart attack. The notes beside each date read, "Protect Margaret, trust setup," and "Linda concerns addressed." Missing one detail like this costs families millions. Subscribe to spot what others miss. I sat on our bedroom floor with these papers spread around me like puzzle pieces. The carpet still smelled like Robert's aftershave. The closet door was half open, showing his work shirts hanging in a neat row. But the papers told a different story. A story about phone calls I hadn't heard and meetings I hadn't attended. A story about a daughter who'd been pressing her father to plan better, while he was quietly planning to protect me from her. Robert knew. Somehow, he knew this day would come. The phone rang downstairs. I let it ring while I studied the calendar page. Those 3 appointments happened during my book club meetings. Robert had always encouraged me to go, even when I wanted to stay home and help with paperwork. "Go read with your friends, Margaret. I'll handle the business stuff." Now I understood why. The answering machine picked up. Linda's voice echoed through the house. "Mom, I stopped by but you weren't there. I need to pick up some of Dad's files for the lawyer. I'll use my key tomorrow around noon." Her key. To the house where I lived. To the files that proved she'd been planning this for months. I folded the papers and slipped them into my purse. Then I walked downstairs and changed the locks. What would you do with proof you weren't meant to find? My name was there in Robert's handwriting, then neatly crossed out. In the margin, "Trust Linda." No. The next morning, I called the one person Robert had trusted more than anyone. His lawyer. The man who'd apparently spent Robert's final weeks helping him build a wall around everything we'd worked for. A wall designed to protect me from our own daughter. Robert's attorney read the papers without speaking. His eyebrows didn't move until he reached the signatures page. Mr. Hendricks had been Robert's lawyer for 15 years. Same downtown Columbus office with the creaky elevator and the secretary who remembered everyone's coffee order. He'd handled every property purchase, every rental agreement, every careful step of building what we thought was security. "Mrs. Thompson," he said finally, setting the papers down between us. "Your husband was very concerned about these irregularities." The coffee was too hot. The chairs were the same burgundy leather Robert and I had sat in when we bought our first duplex. But everything felt different now. What irregularities? Mr. Hendricks opened a file cabinet behind his desk. Inside, a folder marked "Thompson, Confidential Preparations." Linda had been calling our office for 6 months before Robert's passing. Questions about asset transfer. Inquiries about power of attorney procedures. Requests for copies of documents she had no legal right to see. He pulled out a legal pad covered in Robert's handwriting. Notes from phone conversations. Dates. Times. Direct quotes. Your husband documented every call. Every request. Every time she suggested you were getting forgetful or overwhelmed by financial decisions. The notes were Robert's voice. "Linda says Margaret forgot to pay electric bill. Checked, bill paid early, as always. Linda concerned about Margaret's episodes. Asked what episodes. She couldn't specify. She was building a case," Mr. Hendricks continued. Slowly. Carefully. Documenting concerns that didn't exist to justify actions she was already planning. They count on your silence. Subscribe to break it strategically. I thought about all those times Linda had visited in Robert's final months. How she'd insisted on helping with paperwork. How she'd suggested I should rest more and let her handle the business side of things. Robert saw it coming. Robert saw it coming and prepared accordingly. Mr. Hendricks opened another file. He established protections. Legal safeguards. Documents that Linda doesn't know exist. The room was quiet except for the radiator clicking and cars honking 12 floors below. Downtown Columbus moved forward while my world stopped making sense. What kind of protections? The kind that make her current legal filings impossible to sustain. He leaned forward. Mrs. Thompson, your husband spent his final weeks ensuring that if anyone, including Linda, tried to remove you from decisions about your own property, they would fail. 2 witnesses signed while Robert was in the hospital. Both worked for Linda's law firm. The signatures on Linda's petition were witnessed by employees of her attorney's office. While your husband was unconscious. While you were at his bedside. Mr. Hendricks's voice stayed level, but his pen clicked twice. That's not just irregular. It's fraud. I set down my coffee cup. The sound echoed in the quiet office. What do we do now? Now we let Linda finish building her case. His smile was small but certain. While we build a better one. Flag those witness names. You'll see them again. The bank manager pulled up the account history and frowned. These transfers happened on Sundays. We're closed Sundays. First National Bank on High Street had been our bank for 23 years. Same building, same parking spots, same teller windows where Robert and I deposited rent checks every month. But sitting across from Mrs. Davidson in her glass office, nothing felt familiar. Show me again, I said. The computer screen showed electronic transfers from our joint checking account to an account I'd never opened. Dates going back 4 months. All Sundays. All after 6 p.m. Someone would need access to your online banking credentials, Mrs. Davidson explained. Plus a secondary authorization method. Phone or email verification. My phone. Linda had helped me set up the banking app after Robert's funeral. So you can check balances anytime, Mom. Dad would want you to stay involved. Mrs. Thompson, I remember your daughter coming in several times recently. Always urgent situations. Always needing to help you with emergency transfers while you were too upset to handle details. The office smelled like new carpet and coffee. Mrs. Davidson's desk held family photos and a small plant that needed watering. Normal things. Comfortable things. While my life dissolved into timestamps and unauthorized access. She said you'd been having memory issues. That you'd asked her to handle banking temporarily while you grieved. Memory issues. The phrase felt like a slap. I've never had memory issues. I didn't think so. You remember account numbers. You caught an error in your mortgage payment 3 years ago that our system missed. Mrs. Davidson turned the screen toward me. But these transfers, they don't match your normal patterns. The screen showed our account history like a medical chart. Regular deposits from tenants. Steady withdrawals for groceries, utilities, gas. The predictable rhythm of a careful life. Then, starting the week after Robert's funeral, chaos. Large transfers every Sunday to an account labeled Estate Management, L. Thompson, Administrator. How much? $43,000 over 4 months. These patterns repeat in families everywhere. Subscribe to spot yours early. The number hit like cold water. 43,000. Nearly 4 months of rental income. Money that should have been paying my mortgage, my utilities, my groceries while I figured out how to live without Robert. She's been using a copy of your identification for authorization, Mrs. Davidson added quietly. For 6 months. 6 months. That meant it started while Robert was still alive. Mrs. Davidson printed the transaction history. 12 pages of Sunday transfers. Each one authorized with my copied ID and a phone number I didn't recognize. I can freeze the account, she offered. But you'll need legal documentation to reverse the transfers. I folded the papers and put them in my purse next to Robert's handwritten notes and the forged witness signatures. Evidence was building like a stack of proof that my own daughter had been planning to steal my life while Robert was dying. "Freeze it," I said. Walking back to my car, I called Mr. Hendricks. "I have the bank records." "How bad?" 43,000. 6 months of planning. Silence on the phone. Then, "Mrs. Thompson, bring everything to my office tomorrow. It's time we see exactly how deep this goes." She'd been using a copy of Mom's ID. For 6 months. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table where Robert and I used to pay bills together. The stack of evidence was small but growing. 3 documents that proved my daughter had been erasing me from my own life, one signature at a time. Tomorrow, we'd find out what else she'd been hiding. "This isn't sloppy work," the forensic accountant said, pointing to the screen. "This is carefully constructed." Dr. Patricia Wells worked out of a converted house near Ohio State. Her office smelled like printer toner and coffee that had been reheated too many times. File cabinets lined every wall, and her desk held 3 computer monitors that made her look like an air traffic controller. But Dr. Wells didn't direct planes. She caught liars. "Your daughter knew what she was doing," she continued, zooming in on a scanned signature. "Look at the pressure points. This wasn't traced. It was practiced." The screen showed my signature from the bank documents side by side with my real signature from our mortgage papers. Close enough to fool a teller. Different enough to prove forgery to someone who knew what to look for. How many times did she practice? Based on the consistency, weeks. Maybe months. Dr. Wells clicked to another screen. But she made errors. Digital errors. The metadata from the bank transfers showed creation dates that didn't match submission dates. Files edited on Linda's computer, then uploaded from the bank system hours later. Time stamps that proved someone had been preparing these documents at home, then submitting them during business hours. She'd arrive at the bank with pre-filled forms, Dr. Wells explained. That's why the transactions all happened so quickly. No hesitation. No questions asked. Delay costs evidence. Subscribe now, timing matters in the next chapter. What about the witness signatures from the court filing? Dr. Wells pulled up new documents. Patricia Wells and Michael Hendricks. Those are real people who work for your daughter's law firm. But according to their employment records, neither was in Ohio on the dates they supposedly witnessed your husband's signature. She turned one of her monitors toward me. Flight records. Hotel receipts. Credit card transactions. A paper trail that put both witnesses in Florida during the week they claimed to see Robert sign documents. They never met your husband? They never met your husband. They signed papers certifying they witnessed an event that never happened. In legal terms, that's perjury. The room was quiet except for the hum of computers processing data that would destroy my daughter's case. Dr. Wells printed page after page of evidence. Bank logs. Digital signatures. Flight records. Phone GPS data. How long to prepare a formal report? 48 hours. But Mrs. Thompson, I need to file a preservation order first. If your daughter realizes what we found, she might try to destroy evidence. File it. Dr. Wells reached for her phone. Judge Morrison handles emergency motions on Thursdays. If we submit by 5 p.m., she'll review it tonight. I watched her type the motion request. Each keystroke felt like a small victory. Each paragraph built a wall between Linda and the properties she'd been planning to steal. The order went in at 4:47 p.m. By morning, everything would be frozen. What happens next? Dr. Wells looked at me over her reading glasses. Next, your daughter discovers that stealing from family requires more skill than she has. The motion went in at 4:47 p.m. By morning, everything would be frozen. I drove home with a folder full of proof that my daughter wasn't just careless with my money. She was calculated. She was patient. And now she was caught. The sealed envelope sat between my coffee cup and Robert's reading glasses, waiting 43 years to be opened. Mr. Hendricks had called that morning. Mrs. Thompson, the court granted the preservation order. All assets are frozen until further review. But there's something else. Something your husband left that Linda doesn't know about. What do you mean? There's an envelope. Sealed. With instructions to open it only if you were ever challenged on property ownership. I met him at his office an hour later. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with my name written in Robert's careful handwriting. Below my name, open only if Margaret's rights are questioned. Robert knew this day would come. Inside the envelope, an irrevocable trust agreement dated 3 months before Robert's death. Every property, all 22 rental homes and the shopping plaza, transferred into a trust with me as sole trustee. Linda wasn't just excluded from decision-making. According to the trust language, any family member who contested my authority would forfeit any future inheritance completely. He protected you, Mr. Hendricks said. Legally, permanently, and thoroughly. But there was more. A handwritten letter, folded behind the trust documents. Margaret, if you're reading this, our daughter has chosen money over family. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this heartbreak. But I can protect you from poverty. The trust cannot be broken. The properties cannot be taken. Your signature is the only one that matters. Love, Robert. My hands shook holding the letter. Not from fear. From relief. For months, I'd felt like I was losing my mind. Doubting my own memory. Wondering if Linda was right about me being too emotional to handle financial decisions. But Robert had seen through her performance. He'd spent his final months building a legal fortress around everything we'd built together. One document protects generations. Subscribe for papers that defend you. There's something else, Mr. Hendricks said. He pulled out a bank statement I'd never seen. Robert opened a separate account for legal fees. In case you ever needed to defend the trust. The account had $47,000. Enough to fight Linda's lawyers for years if necessary. He thought of everything. Robert loved you more than he distrusted Linda. But he prepared for both possibilities. I read the trust agreement twice. The language was clear. Any beneficiary who challenged the trustee's authority or attempted to claim assets through legal action would forfeit all rights to the trust permanently. Linda hadn't just filed a frivolous lawsuit. She'd eliminated herself from any future inheritance. Does she know? Not yet. But her lawyers will figure it out once we file this in response to her petition. The afternoon light slanted through Mr. Hendricks's office windows. Outside, people walked to their cars after normal workdays. Inside, I held papers that would end a war my daughter had started without realizing she'd already lost. Robert wrote one more thing, Mr. Hendricks said, handing me a small note card. For after you won. The card read, Margaret, you were never too fragile to handle our business. You were too kind to handle our daughter. But kindness doesn't mean weakness. It means choosing your battles carefully. You've chosen well. If Linda contested the trust, she'd forfeit everything. Robert had planned for this war. When do we file? Tomorrow morning. By noon, Linda will discover that trying to steal your life was the biggest mistake she'll ever make. I drove home with the trust documents in my purse and Robert's letter in my coat pocket, right over my heart. For the first time since the funeral, I felt like I could breathe all the way down. The text message was 2 words, motion granted. I didn't celebrate. I started planning. Judge Morrison had reviewed the preservation order overnight. By 8 a.m. Thursday morning, every bank account, every property title, every rental income stream was frozen until the court could sort truth from fraud. Linda couldn't touch a penny. I was drinking coffee on the front porch when my phone rang. Linda's number. Mom, what did you do? Her voice was different. Higher. Faster. The controlled confidence from the courtroom was gone, replaced by something that sounded like panic. I protected what your father built for us. My lawyers can't access anything. The bank accounts are locked. The rental management company says they can't process transfers. What did you file? I watched a neighbor walk her dog past our mailbox. Normal Thursday morning activities while my daughter discovered that stealing has consequences. I filed the truth, Linda. What truth? Mom, you're not thinking clearly. Dad's gone. Someone needs to handle the business side of things. You can't manage 22 properties by yourself. Justice moves slowly but strikes precisely. Subscribe for the complete victory. Your father disagreed. Silence on the phone. Then, what do you mean? He left instructions. Very specific instructions about what to do if anyone tried to remove me from decisions about our property. That's impossible. I reviewed everything with his lawyer months ago. Months ago. While Robert was still alive. While I was supposedly too fragile to participate in financial planning. You reviewed what Mr. Hendricks chose to share with you. You didn't review what he was instructed to keep private. Another silence. Longer this time. Mom, we can fix this. Whatever you filed, we can withdraw it. Family doesn't fight family in court. Family doesn't steal from family either. But I didn't say that. The court will decide what's fair, Linda. This is crazy. You're acting crazy. The line went dead. I finished my coffee and called Mr. Hendricks. She knows about the freeze, I said. Good. Panic makes people careless. Her lawyers will probably file an emergency motion this afternoon. What kind of motion? They'll claim the freeze is hurting the tenants. That rental income needs to flow for property maintenance. They'll paint you as vindictive and Linda as the reasonable party trying to protect everyone's interests. Will it work? Not when Judge Morrison sees what we're filing tomorrow. The afternoon mail brought a certified letter from Linda's attorneys. Pages of legal language that boiled down to one message: withdraw your motion or face consequences. I read it twice, then filed it with the rest of my evidence. The motion went in at 4:47 p.m. By morning, everything would be frozen. That night, I slept better than I had since Robert's funeral. Not because the war was over, but because I finally had the weapons to fight it. The memorial service program listed Robert Thompson's legacy, managed by the daughter who tried to steal it. Linda had organized a memorial celebration at Trinity Methodist, the church where Robert and I were married 41 years ago. The same sanctuary where she'd been baptized as a baby and confirmed as a teenager. Now she stood at the podium in a black dress, speaking about continuing Dad's charitable work to a crowd of tenants, neighbors, and family friends. Robert always believed in taking care of people, she said, her voice steady and warm. That's why I'm committed to ensuring his properties continue serving families in our community. She sounded so reasonable. So dedicated. If I hadn't known about the forged signatures and stolen bank transfers, I might have believed her myself. I sat in the back pew, listening to my daughter perform grief while planning theft. Dad taught me that property ownership is really stewardship, Linda continued. You're responsible for providing safe, affordable housing. That responsibility doesn't end when the owner passes away. Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store nodded. Janet from the pharmacy dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The Martinez family from our duplex on Broad Street held hands. These people trusted Linda because they trusted Robert, and Robert had trusted me to protect what we'd built together. But Linda wasn't protecting anything. She was performing ownership for an audience that didn't know she'd already been caught. Some victories echo for generations. Subscribe for stories that restore faith. My mother is going through a difficult time, Linda said, glancing toward the back of the church. Which is why I'm taking on the responsibility of managing Dad's legacy. Mom needs space to grieve without worrying about business details. The lies came so easily. Rehearsed. Polished. After the service, I stayed to help Mrs. Richardson with flowers while Linda accepted condolences and business cards from people who thought she was already in charge. I arranged roses and listened to conversations. Linda's handling everything so well. Margaret's lucky to have a daughter who understands property management. Robert would be proud of how Linda's stepping up. But near the fellowship hall, I overheard Linda talking to a man I didn't recognize. Corporate clothes. Expensive briefcase. Not a mourner. The liquidity assessment should be finished by Christmas, Linda said quietly. 3 commercial appraisals. Full market analysis. And the residential properties? Those can move faster. Section 8 tenants don't usually contest sale notices. My hands stopped moving. Section 8 tenants. Families who rented from us because we kept rates fair and never raised them without warning. Families Linda planned to displace to liquidate quickly. Timeline for full liquidation? 6 months maximum. Sooner if the court cooperation continues. Court cooperation. As if Judge Morrison was helping Linda steal my properties instead of investigating her fraud. That liquidation date synced perfectly with the hospital records I'd been avoiding. I finished arranging flowers and walked to my car without saying goodbye to anyone. In the parking lot, I pulled out my phone and called Dr. Wells. I need you to check something. Robert's hospital dates against Linda's business filings. What am I looking for? Whether she started liquidation planning before he was dead. Mrs. Thompson, are you suggesting? I'm suggesting my daughter had a timeline. And it started the day Robert was admitted to the ICU. Driving home, I thought about the families Linda planned to displace. The Martinez children who played in their front yard every evening. Mrs. Chen who grew vegetables in the backyard of her duplex. Janet from the pharmacy who'd been our tenant for 8 years. Linda wasn't just stealing my inheritance. She was destroying the community Robert had spent decades building. Screenshot that phrase mentally, it becomes crucial evidence. That night, I started a new list. Not evidence this time. Names. Every tenant who deserved to know their homes were being sold out from under them by someone who'd never even visited their properties. Tomorrow, I'd find out if Linda's timeline included getting rid of me permanently too. Tuesday, 3:17 p.m., the court clerk whispered. She filed during your husband's surgery. Building was locked. Maria had worked the courthouse filing window for 12 years. She knew when something didn't add up. I'd approached her after overhearing her mention irregular filings to another clerk. Sometimes the best allies come from unexpected places. Mrs. Thompson, I've been wondering when someone would ask about those documents. She pulled up the computer screen, fingers moving across keys with practiced efficiency. Look at this timestamp. The filing showed 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. The same Tuesday Robert was having his emergency procedure. The same Tuesday I'd sat in that waiting room for 6 hours, watching nurses check their watches and avoiding my eyes. What bothers me, Maria continued, is the building access log. We lock the doors at 4:30, but filing clerks leave by 3 o'clock on surgery days when we're short-staffed. She scrolled down. No badge swipes after 2:45 p.m. that day. I stared at the screen. But someone filed these at 3:17? Someone did. But not from here. Maria's voice dropped lower. The electronic filing system shows an external submission. Someone used the emergency remote access portal, the one reserved for active court orders and time-sensitive legal emergencies. My chest tightened. Who has access to that? Attorneys with special clearance. Your daughter would have needed authorization codes. Maria clicked to another screen. The request came through at 3:12 p.m. with proper credentials. But look at the authorization signature. The digital signature belonged to Judge Morrison's clerk. But Judge Morrison had been in Cleveland that day, attending his father's funeral. I called the judge's office the next morning, Maria said. They had no record of authorizing emergency access. Someone used old codes. I felt my hands go cold. Linda hadn't just rushed the filing, she'd bypassed normal procedures using unauthorized access. This wasn't desperate improvisation. This was planned circumvention. Maria, how long do you keep these access logs? 7 years. Digital archives don't disappear like paper files. She printed a copy and handed it to me. Mrs. Thompson, I probably shouldn't be showing you this. But I watched you walk out of here that day looking like someone had died twice. I folded the paper carefully. What made you remember? Your daughter came back the next week asking about filing corrections. She wanted to verify the timestamp details. Said she needed to confirm everything was properly documented for family records. Maria shook her head. People don't usually worry about timestamp verification unless they know something's wrong. The implications settled slowly. Linda hadn't just filed fraudulent documents, she'd returned to verify her tracks were covered. She'd thought through digital footprints and access logs. This wasn't emotional acting out. This was methodical planning. Is there anything else you noticed? Maria hesitated, then opened another window. The witness notarization requests. Both witnesses submitted their statements remotely. Same day, 20 minutes apart. Both using the same IP address. Same location. Same timing. Same computer, most likely. Who were the witnesses? Janet Morrison and David Chen. Both attorneys at Preston and Associates. Maria's expression told me everything. That's Linda's firm, Mrs. Thompson. The building logs showed no entry. The documents were filed from inside Linda's own law office, using stolen access codes, with witnesses who worked for her. Not sloppy desperation. Calculated deception. I stood to leave, carrying evidence that would end this. Maria, thank you. Mrs. Thompson. Your husband always spoke about you when he came in for filing updates. Said you noticed everything but spoke carefully. She smiled. He was right. Outside, I called Mr. Hendricks. This wasn't just about forged documents anymore. This was about systematic fraud using legal system access. Linda had weaponized her professional credentials. The afternoon sun felt warmer than it had in weeks. Linda's lawyer called it a misunderstanding. My lawyer called it fraud. The conference room at Hendricks and Associates felt different this time. Instead of receiving bad news, I was delivering evidence. 23 pages of documentation spread across the mahogany table like an autopsy report. Mrs. Thompson has compiled substantial proof of systematic deception, Mr. Hendricks told Linda's attorney, Mitchell Grant. False notarization, unauthorized system access, fraudulent witness statements. Mitchell adjusted his glasses and picked up the access log printouts. This is circumstantial at best. Emergency filings happen during family crises. Emotions run high. Emotions don't create Sunday timestamps in closed buildings, I said quietly. The room went still. I'd been silent through most meetings, letting attorneys speak. But this wasn't attorney work anymore. This was about truth. Linda used stolen authorization codes to file documents while her father was unconscious. Her law firm colleagues signed as witnesses to events they never witnessed. She redirected income from properties she doesn't own. I kept my voice level. That's not emotion. That's planning. Mitchell opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. My client believes Mrs. Thompson is experiencing grief-related confusion. The estate planning was Robert's decision, made with full mental capacity. Then explain the timestamps, Mr. Hendricks said. Technical glitches happen. For 6 hours on a Tuesday afternoon when the building was locked. I pulled out the bank records. Explain deposits redirected to accounts opened 3 weeks before Robert's surgery. Explain witness signatures from people who were in Chicago that day. Mitchell's confidence cracked slightly. He'd come prepared for emotional dispute, not digital evidence. Mrs. Thompson, family inheritance issues are complex. Perhaps a compromise. I don't compromise with thieves. The words came out harder than I intended, but they felt right. Linda took everything while her father was dying. She counted on me being too polite, too tired, too grateful for family contact to fight back. I stood up. Silence isn't surrender, Mitchell. Sometimes it's preparation. Mr. Hendricks smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him truly pleased during this entire ordeal. Mr. Grant, we're filing comprehensive fraud charges Monday morning. Federal court, given the banking irregularities. We're also requesting immediate restoration of Mrs. Thompson's inheritance rights and full asset recovery. Mitchell packed his papers quickly. This is unnecessary escalation. My client acted in good faith during a difficult time. Your client committed documented fraud using professional legal access. Judge Morrison has already been notified about the unauthorized use of his clerk's credentials. Mr. Hendricks handed Mitchell a thick envelope. Discovery requests. We'll need Linda's office computer records, email archives, and client interaction logs for the past year. After Mitchell left, I sat back down. The conference room felt larger, like I could breathe properly for the first time in months. Margaret, how do you feel? I considered the question. Tired. But not defeated anymore. Linda will likely try to negotiate now. Are you interested in settlement discussions? I thought about Robert's hidden notes, his careful planning, his trust in my ability to fight when necessary. Let's see what Judge Morrison says about the handwriting analysis first. Judge Morrison ordered handwriting analysis. 3-week timeline. The specimens would include Robert's signature on the trust documents, his handwritten notes from the hidden drawer, and the questionable signatures on Linda's filings. Professional forensic analysis that would either confirm or destroy Linda's version of events. I drove home feeling something I hadn't experienced since that first courthouse hearing, anticipation instead of dread. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, I wasn't losing. Linda spoke about family unity, while the forensic report passed silently from hand to hand behind her. Judge Morrison's courtroom was smaller than I'd expected for such a consequential day. 2 rows of wooden benches, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look tired, and the kind of carpet that absorbed sound and secrets equally. Linda stood at the defendant's table wearing her best navy suit and a concerned expression. She'd prepared remarks about preserving family relationships and honoring father's wishes. Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to courtroom victories. Your Honor, this entire situation stems from grief-related misunderstandings. My father made clear decisions about estate distribution. Mrs. Thompson is understandably emotional, but legal documents reflect his actual intentions. Behind Linda, Mr. Hendricks quietly distributed copies of the forensic analysis to the court reporter, opposing counsel, and Judge Morrison's clerk. No announcement. No dramatic reveal. Just methodical evidence distribution while Linda continued speaking. Robert Thompson trusted his daughter to execute his wishes responsibly. The trust modifications were discussed extensively with family members who understood the complexities involved. Judge Morrison opened the forensic report. His expression didn't change, but I watched his reading pace slow. He was examining something carefully. The estate includes multiple income-producing properties that require professional management. Mrs. Thompson lacks the legal background to handle such complex assets responsibly. I sat in the second row, wearing Robert's watch and his wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Not as dramatic symbols, just as reminders of promises kept and promises broken. The handwriting analysis was definitive. 3 signatures on the trust modifications didn't match Robert's authenticated samples. The variance exceeded acceptable parameters for natural signature evolution or medical condition changes. Someone had practiced Robert's signature but couldn't replicate the subtle pressure patterns and hand movement rhythms that forensic analysis detects. Furthermore, Linda continued, Mrs. Thompson's recent behavior suggests emotional instability. Hiring private investigators, making accusations against family members, disrupting normal estate administration processes. Judge Morrison closed the forensic report and looked up. Ms. Thompson, are you finished with your statement? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hendricks, does Mrs. Thompson wish to respond? I stood up. Mr. Hendricks had prepared remarks, but I needed to speak for myself. Your Honor, I don't need to respond to my stepdaughter's comments about my emotional state or legal qualifications. The handwriting analysis speaks clearly about document authenticity. The access logs speak clearly about filing procedures. The bank records speak clearly about unauthorized transactions. I paused, letting the facts settle. Linda counted on my silence. She assumed grief would make me compliant. She mistook dignity for defeat. I looked directly at Linda for the first time since entering the courtroom. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. The court has reviewed all submitted evidence, including forensic analysis, digital access logs, and banking documentation. The handwriting analysis indicates significant irregularities in key signature authentication. Linda's attorney whispered something urgent in her ear. She shook her head, then whispered back. Given the complexity of these findings, the court orders a 2-week recess to allow all parties to review the forensic evidence and consider appropriate responses. Mrs. Thompson's asset freeze remains in effect pending resolution. Judge Morrison called recess. When we returned, Linda's chair was empty. Her attorney stood alone. Your Honor, my client has decided to withdraw all inheritance claims and requests immediate dismissal from these proceedings. She wishes to avoid further family conflict. No admission of wrongdoing. No apology. Just strategic retreat when evidence became undeniable. But I understood Linda's calculation. Fighting forensic evidence would mean criminal fraud charges. Withdrawal meant civil defeat but personal protection. Judge Morrison granted the dismissal. Mrs. Thompson, the estate assets will be restored to your control within 10 business days. I walked out of that courthouse feeling something I'd almost forgotten, the weight of victory earned through patience and preparation. No confession. Just a statement about protecting family relationships and a signature on withdrawal papers. Linda's formal withdrawal arrived by certified mail 3 days after the courthouse hearing. Legal boilerplate language about avoiding family discord and preserving relationships. Not one word acknowledging what she'd attempted or apologizing for the months of legal erasure. The defendant hereby withdraws all claims against the Thompson estate and waives any future inheritance rights. Standard language that protected her from criminal charges while ending her civil case. Mr. Hendricks called it a complete victory. I called it incomplete justice. Margaret, you've recovered everything: properties, income, legal control. Linda can never contest Robert's actual will again. She also never admitted stealing from her dying father. I signed the acceptance papers but felt no celebration. She'll tell everyone she generously stepped aside for family peace. Does that matter? You won. I thought about that question for days. Victory without acknowledgement felt hollow. But prosecuting Linda for criminal fraud would mean years of trials, family destruction, and public embarrassment for Robert's memory. The court appointed interim oversight for the transition period. A retired judge named Patricia Sellers would review all asset transfers and ensure proper restoration. Professional, efficient, and completely unnecessary if Linda had acted honestly from the beginning. Mrs. Thompson, your property management experience will serve you well, Judge Sellers said during our introductory meeting. The tenants speak highly of your past involvement. I'm returning to work, I understand, I told her. It feels right. The oversight would last 6 months, enough time to establish clear management protocols and verify all financial irregularities had been corrected. Judge Sellers would submit a final report confirming the estate's integrity. Linda's private note arrived separately, handwritten on personal stationery. Margaret, I hope you understand everything I did was motivated by concern for proper estate management. I believed professional oversight was necessary during a difficult transition period. I'm grateful the court has established appropriate supervision moving forward. Even in defeat, Linda couldn't admit direct wrongdoing. Professional oversight. Difficult transition period. Appropriate supervision. Language that transformed attempted theft into administrative disagreement. But buried in that careful phrasing was something like acknowledgement. She'd recognized my capacity to fight back and chosen strategic withdrawal over prolonged battle. The court's private note, trust provisions upheld. Protections warranted. Judge Morrison had seen through Linda's performance completely. His formal language confirmed what everyone in that courtroom understood: Robert's trust had protected me from exactly the betrayal he'd anticipated. I folded both letters and placed them in Robert's filing system. Documentation of attempted deception and ultimate vindication. Evidence that silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the most powerful response of all. The legal war was over. Now came the work of rebuilding. The safety deposit box key felt heavier than it should. Inside were 40 years of dreams, documented and protected. Robert's private box contained documents I'd never seen: property deeds with handwritten margin notes, insurance policies with beneficiary updates, and a manila envelope marked Margaret's protection file. Inside that envelope were copies of every financial transaction Linda had made over the past year. Bank transfers, account openings, property management company communications. Robert had been documenting Linda's activities long before his final illness. I started watching when she asked about inheritance advance payments. His handwritten note explained. No one needs advance access to money they haven't inherited yet. He'd noticed patterns I'd missed. Linda's increased visits coincided with real estate market upswings. Her questions about property values came right before major tenant lease renewals. She'd been positioning herself for maximum financial gain while Robert was still healthy enough to resist. The archive also contained letters, real ones, in Robert's actual handwriting, addressed to me. Margaret, if you're reading this, Linda has attempted exactly what I feared. You're not paranoid. You're not ungrateful. You're being systematically erased by someone who planned this carefully. I cried reading those words. Not from sadness, from relief. Robert had seen what was coming and protected me the only way he could, with evidence and encouragement. The safety deposit box also held keys to a storage unit I didn't know existed. Unit 247 at Grandview Storage, paid through 2027. Inside were boxes of Robert's business records, backup copies of property management files, and tenant contact information Linda couldn't access or alter. Keep the relationships direct, another note read. The tenants respect honest management. Don't let anyone insert themselves between you and the people who depend on these properties. I spent the afternoon driving through the commercial district, visiting each property. The pharmacy tenant, Mr. Patel, smiled when I knocked. Mrs. Thompson. We've been wondering when you'd return. The rent redirections were confusing, but we kept paying as instructed. Those redirections are cancelled, I told him. Send future payments directly to me. Much better. We prefer dealing with actual owners, not management companies. The office building tenants expressed similar relief. They'd been paying increased rates to Linda's management service, while receiving decreased maintenance response. Standard exploitation disguised as professional improvement. At the small apartment complex, I found deferred maintenance issues Linda had ignored while collecting higher fees. Loose handrails, parking lot potholes, outdated fire system inspections. She'd maximized income while minimizing expenses, short-sighted greed that endangered tenants and property values. I arranged contractor visits for the following week. Real repairs, not cosmetic fixes. The final stop was Robert's favorite coffee shop, built into the corner unit of our first property purchase. The owner, Mrs. Garcia, hugged me when I walked in. I was hoping you'd return to active management. Your husband always said you understood tenant relationships better than any property manager he'd met. He was generous with his praise. He was accurate with his assessment. Behind Robert's final ledger, a letter marked, "For Margaret's Victory." Spring was starting early this year. Daffodils pushed through the parking lot landscaping, and the morning light lasted longer each day. Renewal happens quietly, one day stronger than the last. The tenants didn't applaud when I walked through the plaza. They nodded like neighbors who finally understood their landlord was home. 3 months after the courthouse victory, I'd settled into rhythms that felt both familiar and new. Morning property walks, afternoon tenant meetings, evening paperwork that made sense because I understood every transaction's purpose. The pharmacy expanded into the adjacent unit. Mr. Patel's business had grown steadily under stable management, and he wanted long-term lease security. Mrs. Thompson, when owners actually answer their phones, businesses can plan properly. I signed the expansion lease sitting at Robert's desk, using his fountain pen. Some tools carry forward the work they were meant to do. Linda never contacted me directly after the withdrawal. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of what she'd attempted. But I heard through courthouse connections that she'd taken a position with a firm in Cincinnati. Far enough away to start fresh. Close enough to remember the cost of betrayal. Her departure felt like natural consequence rather than punishment. She'd chosen deception over patience and lost access to everything she'd tried to steal. Justice doesn't always require forgiveness, but it doesn't always require revenge either. The trust provisions Robert had hidden served their purpose perfectly. Linda's betrayal had triggered protective clauses that transferred her potential inheritance to designated charities. Robert's foresight had transformed attempted theft into community benefit. He really thought through every possibility, Mr. Hendricks said during our final legal meeting. The trust protections were comprehensive but fair. If Linda had acted honestly, she would have inherited significantly. Her deception cost her everything. He knew her better than I did, I admitted. He knew people, Margaret. That's why he trusted you with the real decisions. I established new property management protocols that honored Robert's investment philosophy: maintain quality, respect tenants, preserve value for the long term. No quick profits, no corner cutting, no treating housing as purely financial commodity. The office building tenants formed an informal advisory group. Monthly meetings where they could request maintenance, suggest improvements, or discuss lease concerns directly with ownership. Radical concept: communication between people who share space. Mrs. Garcia at the coffee shop became my unofficial property management partner. She noticed maintenance issues, tracked tenant satisfaction, and provided the kind of community insight that no professional management company ever offered. "Your husband was right about you," she told me one Tuesday morning over coffee. "You don't manage properties. You steward them." The word felt accurate. Stewardship implies responsibility that extends beyond immediate profit. Robert had built something worth preserving, and I was the person he'd trusted to preserve it. The financial recovery exceeded expectations. Properties under direct ownership management generated higher income, maintained better tenant relationships, and appreciated more steadily than comparable professionally managed assets. Attention and honesty proved more valuable than efficiency and extraction. I kept Robert's watch but bought my own appointment calendar. His tools, my timeline. His foundation, my implementation. The courthouse clerk, Maria, still nodded when I walked past the filing window. She'd become part of this story, another person who'd chosen truth over convenience when it mattered. 6 months after Linda's withdrawal, I received a wedding invitation. One of the office building tenants was getting married and wanted to hold the reception in the Plaza courtyard. "It feels like community space now," her note read. "Thank you for making it welcoming." I approved the reception and paid for additional lighting installation. Robert would have loved seeing his careful investments become celebration space. Clear sky, steady ground, a legacy preserved by someone who refused to disappear. The quiet war was over. The patient work of building something better had begun.